Oh, everybody, welcome to the Humanode Fireside. The theme of today is Fath, the Fath monetary algorithm. And for those of you who haven't read up, Fath, the word Fath is derived from the word fathom, which stands for understanding after much thought while something is happening, or why something is happening. So, Dado, do you want to start with a brief introduction into Fath?
Well, it's actually like the word fathom is something that we had to come up with out, afterwards. We actually came up with the name. Yeah, but yeah, let me like give a brief introduction to Fath. It's basically a monetary algorithm um, that we have designed in Paradigm and came up with. Um, Originally it was based on real hardcore historical and economic research that we conducted way back, and there are like two main principles which Fath follows, and it's really a long story to understand why those principles are implemented, but let me first go over the principles themselves, and then we'll delve into why they are necessary. So basically, one of the problems that we've been trying to address here is that, in our opinion, and in the opinion of many people out there, how emission is done in fiat systems that we're living in, and in many other systems, including decentralized, are not really fair, so to speak, because you see, like, money should be viewed as a monetary instrument, and when you're giving out emission, it really affects everybody who is actually holding the money.
It's quite true. So, when you say not fair, are we just talking about cryptocurrencies here or uh, fiat in general?
Both of them. It's like fiat that exists, and proof of stake and proof of work networks that already function. They have a big disproportion in the way they come up with the mission and the way they spread it through the network. So our main ideas here is that if emission happens and when it happens, fiat systems tend to have this pyramid as it goes down from the top to bottom in terms of loans. And in Fath, the first principle is that any emission that is given in the system, or if it appears in the system, is directly and let me say this, not equally, but proportionally uh, given to every agent in the system, regardless of him being a validator or an ordinary wallet holder. Uh, Basically, you have like 1,000 tokens on your wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Some reason there's emission going on. For example, 3%. The monetary algorithm will rebalance your tokens to the change of the emission proportionally. So if there's like a 3% emission, you will receive 3% of the tokens on top of the tokens that you already hold. It's like is the first principle, that the emission is delivered to each agent in the system, regardless of his role, and it happens automatically and happens simultaneously, so that there's no disproportion.
So,
And
so
there's
basically,
the second principle. How
okay.
do we measure? Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. So I was just gonna basically say, let's say, so I have, so let's say you have 1,000 tokens in your wallet, and I have 100 tokens in my wallet. You get a 3% emission. Naturally, you get 30 tokens on top of your 1,000, and I get 3 tokens on top of my 100, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and it makes you know you get some percent of the monetary supply, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the idea behind this is that you don't get valued, so that you don't lose your percentage of the monetary supply, and that's the main reason, right? When, fiat credit cycle systems give out money in terms of emission, they don't really deliver to the people, as money is an instrument used by many. They're like selling it to you through loans, and people at the bottom of this pyramid, they don't really receive anything from the emission. They buy it out in terms of loans, and that's just ridiculous if we're talking about money being an instrument. So uh, thanks to crypto and the technology that has been evolving like crazy, we're able to deliver this emission directly to every wallet holder, regardless of him being a validator or just an ordinary person buying this token. For example, in proof of work and proof of stake systems, you also have like this pyramid where validators or miners are really receiving all the emission, and then they're like selling this emission on the market, so that ordinary users that are just buying the token, they don't really get the emission. They are also devalued in terms of monetary supply. You're always losing the percentage of monetary supply that you're holding, and this principle should like help you evade the situation when you're being just devalued by money being printed. And the second principle of Fath is really important, because it's about how do we understand uh, how much money do we have to print or burn, depending on what is going on with the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like two sides of the problem here. The first one is when, in theory, the economic growth inside a system is like skyrocketing compared to the monetary base, right? So, for example, take Bitcoin with its limited supply. For a lot of time, it was just almost a limited supply that wasn't going hand in hand with the economic growth that happened in the Bitcoin network.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, Bitcoin is really a deflationary system where, because of its scarcity and because the monetary base just stands in one place, money gets, how can I say, more expensive with
Mm-hmm.
each passing day for no reason. And people are not really keen on spending it because they know that tomorrow it will cost more than today. And it has been a chronic thing happening to economies of developed countries and developing countries in the early 20th century, when there was a huge industrialization and economic growth, but monetary base was really tied to gold standard, and they were not printing money like at all.
Mm-hmm.
And deflation was a serious disease that took over many countries and was one of the main driving forces behind Great Depression,
Mm-hmm.
because people didn't want to spend money because they knew that tomorrow it's going to cost more, and it just brings disastrous things to an economy. It's not healthy at all. People are not spending money, and then just many entrepreneurs are going out of work, and businesses are crashing because of that. But on the other hand, if the monetary supply is way ahead of the economic growth, then you're basically devaluing people, like fiat systems that have been devaluing us all from the early 70s, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're basically printing money like crazy without understanding how much we should print, and we don't have any economic growth of the size to back it up. And that's why when you're printing more monetary supply than new economic growth that you have, you're kind of devaluing people all the time. Like, for example, well, in the research that we have carried out, we have studied more than 10 different currencies. We started doing ancient Roman dinars, and we studied the history of the British pounds and francs and many other different currencies. And the British were the ones who devalued their population the least out of everything that we researched, and they still managed to devalue currency like 30 times in 100 years.
Yeah. And if you look at the US dollar, that's another crazy one. So, David, so when you came up with Fath, when you came up with the idea, how do you factor in, what determines, let's say, the triggers to, towards emission? How does emission actually happen in Fath? Aha. And there David goes. So, Victor, are you here?
Yeah, sure, I'm here.
Okay, so let's, while Dato is offline here, let's continue the conversation and talk about the triggers for emission in Fath. What are the triggers?
Well, yeah, you see, there are in global monetary systems, there are like two types of monetary economy. This is rule-based monetary policy and discretionary monetary policy that we're having right now. And by discretionary, it means that at any point of time, if the consensus of people on the in the like decisive body of the financial system that takes the decision on how much money we should issue, basically makes this decision anytime they see it appropriate. And while rule-based monetary policies are those that usually follow some rule that has been set before, of course, sometimes they also do discretionary actions, but mostly it is followed by rule. And rule-based monetary policy is something what Fath is, because it follows one simple rule. When we're looking at the history of the economies, trying to figure out like why did you print money this year? Why did you extracted the monetary supply from the economy next year? Looking at the decisions made by people in power controlling the monetary institutions of the past, we usually found out that their decisions were driven simply by the lack of money, or they saw that something's going wrong with the economy. They didn't know what was exactly wrong, and they wanted to make the situation better, not to lose their place. And usually this is what makes the system very fragile, because you see, we need those moments of shocks, right, to understand what's wrong with the economy, and recover from the shock and go on being more wise and prepared to those shocks. And in the discretionary type of monetary policy, what is happening is that the shock happens, they see that, okay, we need to solve this, otherwise the people will feel not that good. And they just, for example, well, usually it happens so, print more money. And here we are, no shock, but no lessons taken out of shock as well. And that is what makes us more and more fragile in the long run.
So the second principle is pretty simple. We decided that the issuance of money or its burn should represent the economic growth in the system. And what we want to achieve is calculate, the value creation inside the system in two different periods of times. We call it gross Humanode product, like GDP, but of the network that you're running. And when we calculate how much value was created using the system in first year, in the second year, and we compare it. And for example, if in the second year the economic growth of the system was bigger than the first years by, for example, 3%, the Fath monetary algorithm just prints 3%, and according to the first principle, it delivers those 3% to each and every holder of the token proportionally. So yeah, this is like the second principle, and it's all about balancing between a deflationary system where economic growth outruns the monetary base, and at the same time not going into devaluation form when you're printing more money than economic growth you have. So yeah, basically it's, once again, we compare the economic growth of the system in two different time periods. It'll be a year for in the beginning. And if the economic growth is bigger or smaller, and that's a very interesting concern, because, for example, in the second year, the economic growth could have been, smaller than the first year by 3%. Then in this case, Fath proportionally burns 3% from each and every wallet inside the system. And that shouldn't scare anyone holding this token, because it allows you to maintain the same percentage of the monetary supply that you already held. Even if 3% are burned, they're burned from each and every wallet in the system proportionally. And that means if you held, for example, if your 1,000 HMNZ tokens were worth like 0.01% of the whole monetary supply, whatever happens, if there's emission or burn, you will still have 0.01% of the monetary supply on your hands, even if the absolute number is entirely different from the one that you had at the beginning. So yeah, basically that is Fath.
Well, I mean, considering the fact that, in the basic fiat currency cycle, you have money in the bank, and, I guess many years ago when you had money in the bank, that was money that was earning something in the bank. Right now, you're basically losing money if you keep it in the bank. So, here, let me ask one more question here, okay? Let me ask Victor, what is the reserve ratio?
Okay, so how do we take what do we think about like reserves and reserves ratio?
Yeah.
Well, of course, there's many other people in our market. Well, at least that was in the beginning of our crypto market. We are the proponents of 100% reserve system, and I can easily tell you why. Right, because at the moment the instruments that you have to control the monetary supply, to adjust it to the new levels of production, right, are really vague and indirect, because our world has moved to fractional reserve system. Like, of course, there is still monetary base, but if the reserve ratio is like less than 10% and it's getting lower and lower every year in many countries.
You mean zero?
Yeah, zero as well. The only thing how you can influence the total monetary supply is not through like directly controlling monetary base, but through interest rates. And as we see, this method is also failing already. And eventually that means that those who are supposed to be like in the head of the monetary policy and help the economy go on and help the economy react to new like events happening, they can do nothing. And commercial banks who hold the reserves and then apply a multiplicator, giving out lots and lots of loans to people uncontrollingly, taking into account only their own, checks and balances, loans and profits. That makes the system completely uncontrollable, and you have complete divergence of the total monetary supply and the amount of goods and and liquidity of goods in your economy. You see that's why the only way to fully control uh, your monetary supply so that it could react to the changes in the system is to have 100% reserve.
And that's why you can be sure about your the things that you're doing with the economy, basically.
So, Dado, you want to talk a little bit about how the GHP is calculated?
Well, yeah. Well, for now, we have two versions in our minds. The first one that's going to be implemented is kind of different from the one that we envision to be at the final version.
Mm-hmm.
So, as at first, the Humanode network will basically run as a layer for transacting like value. Will be only to determine Fath or how it should be rebalanced. We're going to utilize the fees and count how much fees were provided to the network and compare them in the first year and the second year, because like as a monetary layer, as like an instrument of delivering value from one person to another, the real value that is being created can be calculated in transactional form. So we call it like transactional Fath. Basically, after the mainnet, it would take 2 years for the first rebalance to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And first, we're going to like understand and collect the data about the fees in the first year, and then we're going to compare it to the data in the second year, and we're going to rebalance the monetary supply accordingly. And even if the difference is in the hundreds of percent, people shouldn't be worried about anything, because their like percentage of the monetary supply will remain the same regardless of what happens. But as we develop and move forward, we should look at the more sophisticated way of calculating value. We shouldn't like create a bicycle from new. We just use the formulas that are able to calculate GDPs in the countries, but we scale it to a network. So we have like smart contracts running, tracking services that are being provided to one another, products that are being sold through various, smart contracts as well. And we're going to shift from transactional Fath to proper gross Humanode product Fath And that's like a journey that we have to take, because we have to be sure about the value that we're calculating, at least not to make a mistake, in tenths of percent, so that everything is running smoothly, and we're like scaling the monetary base, really interconnected with the economic growth, and is staying in touch with reality all the time. Yeah. So basically, that's how we're going to calculate it. Also, we'll be looking into other various interesting ways of calculating, real value that is being created, because there's like a lot of nuisances in different fields, how you should calculate the value that is being created, so you don't double calculate some values, stuff like this. A lot of work to be done, Shannon, in other words.
Yeah, it sounds pretty tricky here. So, I mean, what kind of things, when you're talking about real value created, what are some examples of what, you can envision at this stage? Is it just simply like products, types of codes, or let's say, there's a whole concept of co-ownership or co-ownership, but um, what are we talking about here when we're talking about creating value in the system?
Well, Victor, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, probably your answer will a little bit differ from mine. But I would say that to understand it easily, you can imagine the protocol creating value, right? This is when the Humanode protocol works. People pay in the fees for biometric enrollment, cyber-resistant services, smart contract execution. This is the kind of value that the protocol brings. However, there is also another level of value if we're not speaking about decentralized protocols, like companies themselves creating value, selling products. Well, the easiest example would be, for example, an artist selling NFT, because if he does that directly in the Humanode protocol, he creates value from zero to something directly on chain, easily trackable. But in total, I mean, the idea is to have a self-accountable economy that will have all the same properties of tracking the value creation flow as GDP. But why we usually not call it GDP? Because you see, I think that GDP is really a little bit outdated concept. When you have international money that is not used only domestically in your country, but around the world, you should account not only for what is happening inside your country, but you should account for the whole value created using your monetary system. You see, that's it from me for now.
Yeah,
David?
basically, Victor has just expressed the idea that we are trying to, implement here. Is like GDP is really outdated because it just collects the data about some value created on some territory somewhere in real life, which is really out of touch with financial systems of modern day, and how money interacts with one another. And it's really about calculating the value created in the financial network, regardless of your like geographical position, which is kind of hilarious in modern day times.
True. So, right now we've just hit about the 30-minute mark, halfway through, and before we go further on, I'd like to use this opportunity to open up to some questions. If I'm quite sure there are some people here that might have some questions concerning Fath. So, does anybody want to ask a question? You're free to type it in chat or raise your hand, and we can have you join the conversation via chat. Okay, Mike, there we are.
There you go, buddy.
My first question is, what monitor system is actually going to back Fath? Is it going to be BTC or is it going to be something totally different? Because as you can see by now, the markets are really getting hit hard by BTC. So I'm just wondering if we can get around BTC itself.
Victor, you want to answer that?
Well, FAS is the monetary algorithm that will be first applied to the Humanode economy. And, well, of course, it would be... Well, the thing is that it really doesn't that much matter what is the price of the token at the moment. It matters how many real actions are happening on the network of Humanode. So the only thing BTC is doing here is that it is changing. It can influence, yes, how much HMNT token costs, but it cannot influence at all what is happening on the Humanode network itself in terms of its usage. Hence, no, BTC is like not influencing the monetary algorithm on the Humanode network.
And BTC price discovery as being the biggest and the oldest cryptocurrency out there would really affect anything in terms of price discovery, and any currency would follow it for now. But kings never rule for eternity. They always abdicate or die.
So, Mike, do you have another question? The second part of the question, or
And
any other
did we
thoughts?
explain it clearly enough, or you're like disagree with us?
Yeah, that's pretty clear. That's pretty clear. That makes sense to me. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, cool.
Also, how long do you think it'll take before it's actually the whole thing is dropped? Like the whole thing is out and Fast system is out and ready to go.
We're aiming at quarter 2, 2022. So everything should be working in place. But the thing is, Mike, that the Fath calculates the difference between 2 time periods, right? So there should be at least like 2 years before rebalancing really happens. So it will start calculating stuff that goes on in the network right from the mainnet. But in reality, like the first rebalancing will happen only in 2 years after the mainnet drops. So yeah, it will take time. Before that is just going to be a steady, limited supply until we can understand how we have progressed in terms of economic growth, so that the Fath determines how much emission it should create.
Right. And in terms of the development of the Fath, I would again repeat that there's like from 0 to 1, where 0 is the transactional based Fath, where like it's the monetary algorithm that reacts to the protocol's economy, only to what protocol does. This is like smart contract execution, biometric processing, cyber resistance services, but it won't account for actions of companies and individuals and what value they bring inside the Humanode protocol. And to have this growth Humanode monetary system calculation, this will be an ongoing work, because there is an eternity of goods and services that are very different, and they have to be sort of accounted for. So this is really like from 0 transactional Fath to 1 Fath that calculates and accounts for all the actions of people, companies, and individuals inside the monetary system. It's ongoing process of development and making the system more and more accurate so that we would perfectly know how much value flows through the economy.
Okay, so just as a wild guess, or as you know, our goal, you know, once we launch mainnet, and you know, it will be the second year when there's a first issuance of a mission through Fath. How many years from the launch of mainnet do you think it will take to move from stage one of transactional based to the actual stage we are aiming for with value creation? Are we looking at 4 years? Are we looking at 5 years? Are we looking at 10 years?
Sure. As you know, as with any development, it's really hard to say, but I really hope that we have a system that is able to properly calculate the at least like some basic smart contract activity by the time we you know, the first 2 years, well, the first kind of rebalancing happens, so that we could start the next period, like the third year, already calculating the difference between the you know, gross Humanode products of the network, and it can be implemented in different ways. Like, you know, first it's like something basic, then it evolves into something very intricate and precise. And so I can't really say.
Okay, then one other question here is, you know, for example, when we're talking about protocol development, or let's say, you know, in our work with biometrics, you know, we have, of course, core team members and new members joining in that are actually, you know, leading in their fields in biometrics or cryptography and whatnot. So we have more and more team members joining, bringing their specialties to the table. And, you know, as we know, as a basic concept for Humanode, you know, a lot of this is going to be, you know, it's not just those in the core team that are going to be working on it. It's not just a small group of people. We really want the, you know, the whole community to be involved. So in talking about the Fath and how it can grow, what type of skill sets, what type of people, what kind of brilliant minds are we looking for to join the discussion here? Are we talking about, you know, young economists? Are we talking, you know, what kind of people do you think will be needed here?
Technologically speaking, it's really it's not that hard, really. It's all about, you know, implementing proper smart contracts and just calculating the value it goes through. But as you already mentioned, it's all about the, you know, economic approach of how to calculate it. How do we understand that something has to be calculated in some way? Because for example, how do you calculate the value of like constructing a building, right? So you construct a building and you pay some money for it. Do you just calculate the paid money, or you calculate for how long this building is standing and providing its value to the network itself? So it's really hard to determine these things and to calculate them properly, not to have very big problems with understanding what real value was produced. So it's all about proper approach in calculation. And, you know, Victor, you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say that if you look at how countries nowadays calculate GDP, you will notice really huge differences. For example, United States of America is one of the only countries that calculates in GDP. If you have a flat, right, and it's like standing still, or even you're living in the flat, how they calculate the value of your property? Well, in some countries, if you're not really renting it to somebody, it is zero. in the United States, they have an approximation of how much you would earn by renting a flat to somebody else, and they include every flat in GDP. So it's all about the consensus of people, and in our case, it's the consensus of DAO, how to properly calculate the value of flow. Of course, if we're talking about complex production, it's all about supply chain, to find out whether it's just a transaction. I mean, somebody bought something, and where there was a value add from the participant of this supply chain.
And like the way we calculate it basically evolves with the consensus, which goes in hand with the DAO, the vortex, right? So if there's like some proposal to calculate something in a different way, and vortex votes on that, we gotta like calculate it right, like that, not calculate just a flat standing without anyone living in them. Why do we have to even calculate as a valuable stuff? Then it happens. Like what Vikar's like saying is that every single thing that we calculate is an axiom that we have to just agree upon, but we have to make it as close as to reality as possible.
So in advancing the discussion here, you mentioned the DAO and how obviously, if we come up with a calculation saying, we should calculate this way or that way, to be voted upon. But, obviously, anything there's discussion and different minds, clashing ideas actually spark some interesting truths as we go along. Do you see, let's say, community forums designed for talking about the economy, or do you see special teams working on this, or how do you see this evolving?
We definitely envision a whole community involvement, like Humanode involvement in Fath and any monetary policy. It's just that we are like creators of Humanode. We're trying to implement Fath here, but to say the truth, if in the future Vortex will decide that Fath is not a good approach to monetary policy, it can easily vote out to implement any kind of monetary policy it wants to. And because, democratic consensus is above any idea here.
What we really want to sustain in Humanode protocol and Humanode economy is optionality. And by that, I mean many protocols, they go into politics because the core of their protocol is a novel consensus algorithm. But the industry evolves every year, and they have a proposition from their brilliant developer, hey guys, we can make it more efficient. And the heads of the protocol, they're thinking, but we are changing the core algorithm, which like led us to create the company. And they just are stuck in the politics of their, initial way. And that's why that hinders their development. That's what we want to avoid in our protocol, and to always have optionality of moving forward with a completely new approach, even if it will, let's say, lead to anything we've done before, it becomes obsolete. It's okay. We're moving forward.
Yeah, any part of this project should be interchangeable, should be able to evolve if the technology requires it to evolve or die, and so that we're not stuck in discussion. Oh, we have spent so much time and money on something, and we don't really want to throw it out because we think that it's our baby or something like this. This is like approach that drives networks into the ground, and they stop evolving and developing. And we want to like retain and maintain the principles of free democratic voting, biometric uniqueness and verification of existence at the very core, but everything else, according to protocol, concerning the monetary policies, should be a point for discussion and evolution through democratic consensus of real human beings governing the system, and should also evolve with everyone else.
In terms of developing all those complex things, I would say that, well, we already have a forum. People can go there, propose anything. I hope while reading the white paper, going through the forums, you notice that we have a separate, working space for Fath in particular, where we outlined the ground principles, but didn't write a lot really. And yeah, this won't be only people, because people alone can't solve complex problems. So we can see teams of people forming think tanks, coming up with new proposals and researchers, pushing them in front of the community, of course, getting grants for the work that brings value, and moving forward like that little by little.
Okay, thank you. So we're down to 13 more minutes, and I would like to open the floor up again to further questions. So, okay, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was wondering, first of all, what's about the rough estimate of circulating supply you want to get out there to start this all off with? And then my next question will be about volts and also yield farming. So let's start with circulating supply first.
May I ask you, Mike, before answering that question, does it really differ whether we have like 10,000 of tokens or 1 billion of tokens in the beginning?
Well, I think Mike is asking how much of the percentage of the monetary supply is going to be there in circulation from the very beginning.
Yeah, just to start off with, not like what you're planning to have in the end, or anything, just what number we're looking at to start off with it as an amount.
Okay, well, if we're talking about the total amount of token and the number of it, I think that number is completely useless, because when you look at the protocol, you should look at its capitalization, not the total amount. But
Victor,
in terms of percentages, our goal is really to have as much of the circulating supply out of total as possible, reserving like 10% for the future development of the DAO, when, for example, the money that are gathered through the sales are already gone into development, right? I would say that our goal is to start with 70%.
So we want to have 70% of the whole supply circulating from day one. It's like much more than any other network out there. And the reason for that, Mike, is that we're not afraid of giving out the circulating supply, because it's not entangled with the voting power in any way. Proof of stake networks, and they really don't really like giving out money because it's entangled with the voting power. And if you just give out money to everyone else, you won't be able to acquire quorum in the voting procedures that are going to happen in your network sooner or later. And to make it very fair and decentralized, we're aiming at 70% from the very start.
Yep. And there was also a part about yield farming, I suppose. And
Yes.
the answer to that is that one of the principles of the monetary system we want to create is that if you hold a token already, there is no way you can get diluted by other participants. And what is yield farming? It's basically the dilution of those who do not provide liquidity to the DeFi protocol, right? And it is giving free tokens to those who provide liquidity, making this balance and making the constant money flow again from the bottoms to the up, to the big holders. So yeah,
the ground principle of Fath is not to devalue people and not to dilute monetary base. It's pretty much out of the question.
so no yield farming, and in our opinion, what happened over the last years in the crypto market is that first we had those policies of limited token supply, stable predictable inflation, like 3 falling to 1%. And what we're having now in crypto is just another kind of hyperinflation when you get like 200% on top of your holdings a year. Isn't that hyperinflation?
Not only that's hyperinflation, that is like returning to the same fiat principles. It doesn't really change anything, and crypto in this matter just becomes new fiat. And another thing is that it's even worse than ordinary money, because here everything is transparent and checked, and you cannot just go around giving out cash, nobody knowing what you're doing. Here is everything tracked, so running a system like this is just it's just not right.
Yeah,
So,
I would say that we would have not yield farming again, because yield farming is when you have capital, you get more capital, and that's it. You contribute only with money because you had more money than others when you entered the system. You will be farming like with your brains, with your proactivity, participating in the DAO, and this is how you will be reaping rewards, because like a huge chunk of the funds we're going to gather developing the protocol will be going directly to DAO. And that is your question about the vault and the treasury, for example. Yeah, as fast as possible, when the network will be reasonably decentralized and more or less not subject to attacks, because it's already standing on its feet pretty well, the control of the treasury will be in the hands of the DAO and in the hands of democratic voting.
So, guys, it's like 7 minutes until the end. So I think I'll unmute everybody here. So this stops being just a dialogue of two people and becomes a proper fireside chat.
So if anybody has questions, just go ahead and speak up. And you're free to raise your hand too.
You're free to say anything you want, not even on the questions. Just okay.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much for today's participation.
Thanks, man.
So, what shall we talk about?
Shannon, how do you think people will react if there's like a proportional burn happening?
Well, until they really understand what is going on, I think some might panic while others won't. But I just out of curiosity, I'm wondering how it will affect, let's say, or if it will affect the price of Humanode tokens out in the market.
Well, the
Well,
price.
yeah. Go on.
Go ahead.
I would say that I would start with the reasons for that and why this such monetary policy exists in the first place. One, people shouldn't be diluted, and the second thing is that it's really hard to live in an economy where prices are changing every day. That is why it has always been the goal of any monetary economy to keep the stable growth of prices. In our case, we don't say that there should be stable growth of prices because sometimes the economy might fall down, but the prices should stay stable in order for people to easily live in their economies. How would it affect the price? Well, if the market is that stupid how it is now, we can predict that because it is really stupid. But if we say that there are rational actors in the economy, as we always try to model in economic theory, I would say that people know that Fath, in Fath or out Fath will happen. People see the exact amount every day because they can see the output of the economy or the protocol. And in the ideal economic world, it will influence the price so that if the economy grew a lot, the price of the token will fall down a lot just because we issued a lot of new tokens. But the whole capitalization will be growing steadily with the real value created with the network. But if you want to speculate on how it could be in a non-perfect world we're living in, please go on. I would be interested to listen to you.
David?
Rational behavior has nothing to do with economics.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. So I think that, people will just, if they feel that there's a proportional burn that is going to happen, at first, when they don't understand that the monetary base percentage is going to be maintained regardless of what happens, they're just going to go and sell everything, I think. Because they're going to be afraid that they're going to have less money tomorrow than they have today.
Mhm.
It's just psychological things, you're looking at the absolute number of tokens you have, and you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna have 4% less in absolute numbers, and no, I have to sell now, so I go and sell.
Then again, there's a whole thought process saying, well, okay, if there's going to be less tokens in circulation, it means that my value of one token is higher than before.
Yeah, but it's like a prisoner's dilemma on a very large scale. So if there are multiple participants in the network and they're looking at the economic output being different, and they're just thinking, we gotta spend more so that the economy drives up, and then probably we won't have a proportional burn. We'll at least go to zero and have everything will maintain the same size. But some people will not have to spend anything. They will just it's better for them to just sell and maintain their value that they already have. And it's either they work together and they drive the economy and no one gets burned, or they just sell their positions to evade any kind of risk of being burned of their absolute number of tokens. So it's like a prisoner's dilemma here.
Mhm. Well, we have hit the 1 hour mark. So we are officially closing the chat for today. Of course, we will stay here for a bit more. And well, once again, thank you everybody for joining us for this fireside, and for the remainder of the time while we're here. This is basically a free for all session. If you want to talk about baseball or the market or food, It's all up to you.